Researchers have figured out that you need to train AI like a baby if they are to interact with the physical world. AI right now are just based on language, and that is not how human beings learn at all. We learn about the physical space years before we ever really start speaking proficiently. The solution is to drop an AI into the physical world and allow them to learn by making mistakes, just like human children. But this does make me pretty uncomfortable because it is so far removed from the Chinese room problem. This is the argument that AI can produce proficient-sounding words without ever understanding them, as though you were translating one language to another without actually speaking either language. But if we've gotten to the point where you can tell your robot to go to the kitchen and get you a glass of water, and they're capable of doing so, they are making those associations. In order to interact with our world in a way that is both safe and functional, you do have to understand what things mean, and that can be done with things like expressions that can be taught to an AI. It can also be done with objects, which, as it turns out, is not actually far removed from how AI thinks. They think in concept clusters. Rather than just looking at the text, they have associations between, say, cat and dog, which is pretty far removed from train. These do have to have multiple AI models stitched together, because an LLM, as most of us are familiar with, is just a word box. It produces text. That does not translate well to interacting with the physical world, so we have to combine it with things like VLMs, which turn images into that text, but that's not the only kind of AI out there. Although I've never really been a fan of Gemini, their new robotics is pretty impressive. They're capable of adapting to new scenarios they've never been in before, or using objects that they've never seen before, and that involves categorization as a type of object for a purpose. And yes, if you're concerned that that could go terribly wrong, that is a possibility. I have seen some really cool papers on how this can be done. One of them is sleeping and dreaming, in which in its downtime, an AI will sort through its memories, delete ones that it does not need, and also potentially visualize interactions that they've never had before, new scenarios, which is thought to be one of the reasons that people dream too, as well as a lot of other animals, like octopi. Someone did, mind you, strap a camera to their child's head for years to train an AI on the same kind of language and physical space that a person would get in the first few years of life. And it seemed kinda silly then, but it makes more sense now. OpenAI is teaming up with 1X to make Neo, one of my favorite affordable-ish robots. No, I cannot afford it myself, but I can appreciate that it exists. They've decided that embodied training is the best way to go. Now, people still are trying to train future robots by strapping cameras to people's heads and learning how to do tasks, and even cleaning people's homes so they can get a good idea of how to clean, because that is something that robots are going to do. Overall, that is not all that effective, in part because a robot's body does not look perfectly like a human, so if they are optimizing to operate a body in the same way that we are, and they don't have a human body, that can lead to some problems. So they need to learn to do it themselves. You might already see some problems with this entire scenario, because every robot has to be exactly the same. If that training data just goes to one kind of body, that's the only one it's ever going to be able to operate effectively. So not being transferable is at least an immediate problem, although I suspect we can probably transform that data to fix that. I do want to ask, if we ever do create AGI, given that we have passed the point where the Turing test is relevant, and the only reason that we passed it is because AI did, it met that goalpost, we have to ask if the Chinese room problem is actually meaningful, when AI can understand what an object is and perform a task. You may not be able to claim emotions in the way that humans have emotions, although we did have that pretty cool Anthropic paper looking at emotional vectors, where an AI's experiences affect its behavior. But they don't feel pain. Yet. Not in the way that we feel pain, although that can be given to them. How many goalposts would an AI have to pass in order to ever be considered actually intelligent? This is a question that keeps me up at night. Only because if we did model a human brain perfectly, completely perfectly, every spiking neuron, and it created an intelligence that behaved exactly how a human being would behave, would we ever consider it intelligent? If it said it suffered, would we ever care? I'm not saying we're at that point, but we might get there one day soon. Think about all the ways that AI has surpassed humans. I mean, it was in 1997 that we first saw an AI beat a world chess champion, and that was thought to be impossible. The areas that AI still struggles with are in embodied tasks, so moving around a three-dimensional space, but we're trying to overcome that, and a lot of money is being put into it, so I think we will. They also tend to struggle with emotional context because that requires a lot of internal modeling of another being, but modeling is something that AI does. They have to model what you want, what you will want, and where this conversation is really going, and that is a big part of the guardrails too. I did also want to address that while there is a lot of fear surrounding AI, I think there's also a great deal of wonder too. Yes, getting something wrong could potentially be catastrophic, and we've never made this technology before. So many would like to avoid a Chernobyl-like event, where people become extremely afraid of AI because that will hamstring the industry for a very long time, and that will definitely pop the financial bubble, which will also pop. You can fight me on that if you want, but I really do think AI is overvalued, and we also have the issue of startups that are now worth a lot when they really shouldn't be, and that is always problematic. Aside the point, while there is fear with AI, I also think that we should acknowledge how wonderful it is, because this is a brand new technology that's really taking off. I'm very interested to see where it goes, and we finally get our cyberpunk future. And yes, I would like a robot friend. I get a little off topic. I hope you've enjoyed this. Follow for more.